Hey guys, Coach Cersei here. Hey, we are getting close to wrapping up our fundamentals unit. I know it's a lot of information, but hopefully as we go through this, you're starting to become more familiar and also to be able to understand and get a better idea that you are more familiar with the concepts of economics than you probably thought you were before you started. But today we're going to talk a little bit about marginal cost, marginal benefit. We're going to talk about production. We're also going to get into the types of economic systems. And so those are some of the things that we're going to look at today. You guys are also going to be working on production possibilities frontiers, and that'll be something that you'll work on outside of this. But real quick, as you guys have already become somewhat familiar with these, because these are some of your vocabulary words, talking about marginal cost, marginal benefit, also looking at specialization and voluntary trade. And we're going to talk about this concept that Adam Smith spoke of in his book, The Wealth of Nations, but talking about the invisible hand and the invisible hand of the marketplace. And it's a pretty interesting phenomenon, but it's one that you are very familiar with. You just don't realize you are. So we're going to look at this. We're going to define marginal cost and marginal benefit. We're going to talk about how free markets operate, how they regulate themselves, and some of the advantages of the free market economy, as well as voluntary exchange. But a quick review, as you guys have already defined these as you're working through your vocabulary words, is that marginal cost is the cost added by producing one additional unit of a product or service. And so here's what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to get caught up in all of the super details and the analytics of marginal cost, marginal benefit. You guys can do that as you take your collegiate level microeconomics courses, macroeconomics courses. We're going to really just look at the fundamental basics of marginal cost, marginal benefit, and more of the concept. But we are going to do a really quick calculation just to kind of give you an idea about marginal cost. So let's look at this. Any of you guys that have taken any kind of business courses, you're on there. The widget is the imaginary product that we use to apply all business and economic concepts to. So just to give you a basic understanding of marginal cost, as defined by the cost added by producing one additional unit of a product or service. Let's say we're making widgets. And so our cost of production, just based on the numbers that I've given, and that's another thing that I want you to consider and to remember when you're working in economics and you're provided numbers like this, only work off the numbers given. Don't try to add into it. Don't try to push stuff into or fit the square peg in the round hole. Just work with the numbers that are provided to you. Okay, so in this example for widgets, the cost of production to produce 10 widgets, as you see here, is $100. Pretty basic. So let's say that now we produced one more widget, and that cost went up from $100 to $105. So based on the information below, and just this information below, what is the marginal cost of a widget? Yeah, $5. As you can see here, 100 cost to produce 10 was $100. To produce that one more, that next one, is $105. Now, what we don't know here is we don't know the production cost. We don't know all the things inside of it that make up the production cost. We don't know why it went just to make one more unit, why the cost went up $5. We don't know anything about that. It's not given. That information is not given. All we have is what we see here, and that's all I want you to work with. So that's marginal cost, the cost added by producing one additional unit of a product or service. So marginal benefit. And one of the great things about economics, a lot of times we don't change. The concepts are the same. We're just talking about benefit and cost. And so based on that, if marginal cost is the cost added by producing one additional unit of product or service, what do you guys think marginal benefit is? Yeah, excuse me, it's the additional satisfaction or utility. Now, I want to make sure that you guys understand this too. When you're talking about benefit, when you're looking at economics or business, benefit, another word for benefit is satisfaction. Another word for satisfaction is utility, not like the power and water lights outside, but utility, when we're looking at this, utility, and we're talking about economics, means satisfaction. So marginal benefit is an additional satisfaction or utility that we receive from consuming an additional unit of a good or service. And so pretty basic. Again, we'll talk more about this when we actually get into class. But again, so marginal cost, the cost added by producing one additional good or service. Marginal benefit is that satisfaction that we get from consuming one additional unit of a good or service. Now, I'll let you read through this as you can go through. You can stop the video and actually read through it. But essentially what we're talking about here is we don't operate on totals. In other words, if we think about the benefit between watching an entire day of television, 24 hours, or an entire day of studying, there's a pretty good chance that we will determine that the entire day, 24 hours of studying, would be more beneficial to us if we're in school than an entire day of watching TV. But we don't, that's not how we live. And so when we really think about real life application, we kind of work off of marginal benefits and marginal cost. And so let's say that we're studying, and then, we're in the middle and we've been studying 3 hours and our minds are completely just shot. Well, we say, you know what, I can benefit by studying another hour, but I really, I got to take a break. And so maybe watching TV for 30 minutes, I know that I am not going to get as much benefit from the watching TV than I am from studying. But I will tell you, right now, my brain needs a rest and I need to watch some TV. And so when we think about that, yes, the marginal benefit of watching TV outweighed or was greater than the marginal cost. That is giving up 30 minutes of studying, because we believed, based on the circumstances, that watching TV was worth, that 30 minutes was worth more of 30 minutes of studying. So again, I don't want you to get too confused, but I just want you to understand that's kind of the world we live in. We work off this marginal benefits and marginal costs. We don't look at things in totality. We don't look at things in, the benefit of studying 24 hours versus the benefit of watching TV. We don't look at that. We look at those individual decisions. In other words, talking about opportunity costs. It is more beneficial for me to do this right now than to do this right now. And so that's what we're talking about. Specialization, as you guys have already determined through your vocabulary, is a business or an area or economy focusing on the production of a limited scope or a small number, or maybe one, product or service to gain greater degrees of production or productive efficiency within an overall system. Now, that's kind of an academic definition to say, hey, a business or a nation or an economy that focuses on just a small number of things so they can be the best at it. Apple, what do they focus on? Yeah, electronics. Nike, what does Nike focus on? Yeah, shoes and apparel. So in other words, I would bet that Nike could make a computer if they really wanted to. I think the people within Nike and their manufacturing, they could figure out how to make a computer in electronics. I believe that Apple, if they really, really wanted to, could figure out how to make shoes and apparel. But it doesn't, the cost of what they would have to give up, what Apple would have to give up to try to figure out how to make shoes and shirts, far outweighs what they would actually get by actually doing that. So in other words, so Nike specializes in apparel and shoes. Apple specializes in electronics. Apple buys their shoes and apparel from Nike. Nike buys their electronics from Apple. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at my Apple Watch right now. It's got the Nike swish on it. So again, that's what we're talking about, specialization. Country, to give you an example, the Middle East, they specialize in oil. They have a lot of oil reserves. That's what they specialize in. Other countries will specialize in other things based on, one, what their geography or maybe some of their climate may allow. It all depends on things that are going on within that geographical area or economic area will determine what they specialize in. So again, specialization, and that's really what, when we're talking about global trade, when we get into that later on in the semester, we'll talk about that and the reason why areas and countries and businesses specialize. Now, you guys are already familiar with voluntary exchange. That's that free, mutually beneficial, and non-fraudulent. In other words, it's not fake. You're not taking somebody's money, but that free, mutually beneficial, and non-fraudulent exchange of goods and services between buyers and sellers. That's what you guys do every day. When you go buy your cup of coffee, you go through Starbucks. If you go through Chick-fil-A, when you go on Amazon and you're buying, when you pay for that good or service and you receive what it is that you bought and wanted to buy, that's voluntary exchange. Nobody forced you to buy it, and what they charged, you paid. You both received it. It was both mutually beneficial, and everybody wins. And again, that's voluntary exchange. So the market's self-regulating nature. Now, this is something that you are already familiar with, okay? Because in every transaction, the buyer and seller really consider their own self-interest. So in other words, when you go to buy something, if something is too expensive, you don't buy it because it's not in your best interest. Now, it would be in the best interest of the person or the company selling it because they would make more money. But your decision is in your best interest. So when you actually purchase something, you believe that the money that you are spending is actually worth what you're going to receive in back. In other words, when you go into Chick-fil-A and you spend your money and get that number one, you believe that the benefit that you're going to receive from eating that, consuming that number one, is worth the money that you paid for it. In other words, that's what you were willing to give up the money because it was in your best interest because you were hungry and you wanted to spend that money. And so that's what we talk about in the overall free market and just the market self-regulating nature. Self-interest is the motivating force in the free market. If you want to make some money, then you're going to sell something. You're not going to sell a product for less amount than you paid for it because you're not going to make a profit. It is in your best interest and self-interest to sell something for more than you paid for it. And hopefully you're going to sell it for a price that somebody's willing to buy. So you're hoping that they will find it in their best interest to actually purchase your product. That's the way this thing works. If your price is too high, people don't buy it. If it's priced too low, you don't sell it because you can't make any money. Again, so that's when we think about that we consider our self-interest, us being the buyer or the seller. That's what we consider. Now, producers in a free market, they struggle for the dollars of consumers. This is competition. This really regulates the free market. We see all the advertising, all the stuff that you see online on your phone when you're looking at it, all the way when you're surfing the web and all of a sudden an ad for Amazon or whatever product that you just did. Companies are competing for your dollars. Media outlets and apps and things, they are competing for your time. Again, when you're looking at this, is all about competition, and so you are going to shop. You're going to spend your time on the places that one you enjoy or you feel is worth you spending your time or your money on, and that's what competitors are doing in companies. They are competing to try to win your business, to win your time. And that's really what regulates the free market. Because again, if it's just because somebody's selling a product, if you don't like it, then you're not going to buy it. And so again, that's how we talk about competition. Now, this interaction of buyers and sellers, that's motivated by self-interest and regulated by competition, okay, it all happens really without a central plan. In other words, nobody really knows why this becomes popular or that becomes popular. If you guys remember back those fidget spinners that everybody had to have, man, when those things came out, all of a sudden everybody had to have one, and it went crazy, and all of a sudden everybody started buying them. Producers, companies started to sell them, and the first they only came in a couple of colors. Then in a matter of months, they were in every collegiate, every college football or college program. They were in every baseball. They were and done every basketball, football, and everything else. Then all of a sudden, without any kind of indication or really anything, nobody wanted them anymore. They were all of a sudden not very popular, and that happens a lot. We call that, and this is what a phenomenon that Adam Smith talked about, is the invisible hand of the marketplace. We all have felt the impact of the wind. We can watch what the wind does. We can watch trees move. We can watch things be blown around, but none of us have ever actually seen the wind. We only see the effect of wind. That's the same thing here. We don't see this invisible hand moving, making some things popular and some things not popular, but we do see the effect of this invisible hand, why people will all of a sudden buy something or all of a sudden they won't buy something. And so that's that market self-regulating nature. None of it happens really with any kind of central plan. It all is determined by buyers and sellers' desire to buy and sell. And it all depends on their self-interest. And so you guys are very familiar with this, and I think you understand this probably a little bit better than you think you do, and that's a great thing. A couple of advantages for the free market really quick. One, it's efficient. Okay, as a self-regulating system, the free market is efficient. If a restaurant serves bad food and their service is bad, you're not going to shop there and you're not going to spend your money there. And so it is efficient. In other words, if companies and service providers are providing good products at a good price, there is a pretty good chance that you are going to buy them. And the only way that they stay in business is for their prices to be set at a point that they can actually make a profit. So if they're not very good at their business, they're not going to be efficient. Okay, economic growth, because competition encourages innovation. Think about all the different iPhones, iPhone 4, iPhone 5, iPhone 6, iPhone 7, iPhone 8, iPhone 9, iPhone 10, iPhone 11, iPhone XL, iPhone 8000. Okay, every new iPhone that comes out is innovation. In other words, it's providing something better. It's an upgrade, and we are willing to pay for that. And because that competition encourages innovation, think about the different types of phones. You got the Samsung, you got the Galaxy, you got all those other ones. One offers a bigger screen, one offers more storage space, one offers more apps, one offers all of this. That's innovation. Producers are making things better because they know we will buy them. And the more that we buy, the more our economy grows. Economic freedom. Free market economies have the highest degree of economic freedom, and we talked about that as one of our broad social goals. Okay, our freedom, the freedom that we have as consumers and producers to spend our money the way we want to, use our money in the way we want to, generate our income, to invest the way we want to. And so when we talk about a free market, if we don't want to buy something, we don't buy it. If we want to start a business selling widget spinners because everybody wants to buy them, or fidget spinners, then we'll do that. That's the level that we talk about economic freedom. Also, the additional goal of an advantage of a free market is that we can offer a wider variety of goods. If you just sat down and really thought about how many different styles of shoes somebody could buy, your head would explode, because there are literally millions of different types of shoes that people can buy. And why do we have those? Because obviously somebody wanted them. Somebody was willing to make them because they knew somebody was willing to buy them. And so this free market offers a wider variety because, hey, we all want something different. And so if we're wanting it, somebody's willing to make it. So hopefully you guys just think about the free market and just the advantages of the free market and those components that go into it. If you have any questions, certainly email me, or when we get into class, we can talk more about those. So now I want to talk very quickly about the three types, and really there's four types of economic systems, three distinct and one that's kind of a mix, and we'll talk about that. Okay. And then the three economic questions. So economic systems, you guys have already looked at this, I think, through your study island. If you haven't done the study island yet, you will be. But people create these rules for trade. In other words, how we exchange goods and services, how we produce things that fall along in a continuum, one side or another, between a command, which is controlled by a government, right, and the market, which is controlled solely by producers and consumers. Okay, so we find somewhere economic systems fall somewhere along that bracket. Now, before we get into that, we have to understand the fact that each society and economic system must answer three questions. Okay, these three questions guide the decision-making process of the producers and providers of goods and services. And this is all on the production side, because at the end of the day, we can't buy something that hasn't been produced. And so what influences the production, we're talking about economic systems and how we answer these questions. So the three questions are, one, what to produce. Okay, this has to be determined by the producers. Another one is, how do we produce it? Okay, so if we're deciding what we're going to produce, we got to figure out how to produce it. And then finally, for whom to produce it. So who are we actually making this product for? Because when we think about the audience and think about why we're actually making this. And so those are the three economic questions that every society and economic system must answer. And it guides the production process, not the consumption side, but it guides the production process. So very quickly, the economic systems we talked about, there was one traditional economic system, right? That is guided by customs and traditions. Very seldom, really no at a national level use a traditional system. It's just not efficient, okay? The other three Let's talk about two. One is a free market system. Free market system has absolutely no governmental intervention at all. It is completely free market, kind of wild, wild west, no government regulation. Then on the other side, you have a command economy. That is, all of those three economic questions are completely determined by the government. It's a centrally or command system. And we'll talk a little bit about those. But when we think about these types of economic systems, okay, in a market economy, okay, the what to produce is determined by consumers' preferences, what we want, okay, because companies are not going to make things that we're not going to buy. In a command economy, what to produce is determined by the government's preferences. What does the government want to produce? Not so much what do we want to be produced, is what the government wants to produce. In the how to produce, in a market economy, is determined by producers seeking profits. In other words, hey, they want to make something for the least amount of cost so they can sell it for the highest amount of price and make the largest profits. In a command economy, how to produce something is determined by the government and their employees. Profit is not necessarily, it is not at all a determinant or really a motive. When we think back about airplane builders, back prior to Russia, the Soviet Union, when it was a communistic country and a command economy, they would have their airplane production. Literally, their facilities would make one plane every year because there was no incentive to actually produce more. When you look at the United States, let's say Lockheed Martin, they're making 30 planes in a month because the profit motive. They knew that they could sell planes. There was an incentive to produce more. And so the producers, which was Lockheed, if you're talking about a market economy, they would produce more. They wanted to make more money. In a command economy, there was no incentive to make more, so people didn't work harder. The last one, for whom to produce. Okay, determined by purchasing power in a market economy. In other words, if a whole lot of people want to buy a particular product, somebody's going to make that, okay? And they're going to produce it, and they're going to focus on what that large segment, that large market power, what they want, okay? If 3 people want a product, there's a pretty good chance that these monster companies are not going to focus solely on what these 3 people want. Now, in a command economy, for whom to purchase is determined by the government's preferences. You know, they're saying, oh, we're going to make this, and people will just like it. They're going to have to like it. We're not giving them really any choice. That's what we're doing. So those are the distinctions between the economic systems, talk about a market economy and a command economy. Now, the United States is actually a mixed economy. A little bit of more market economy, but there is a governmental component that provides regulation. When you think about taxes, when you think about some of the other government programs to help regulate the economy, we're going to talk about how the government and the Federal Reserve help stabilize the economy. We're going to talk a little bit more as it comes down. But when we think about this, we talked already about, we're talking about economic freedom, we're talking about equity and equal outcome versus equal opportunity. Which of these, a command economy or a market economy, do you think would be more concerned with equal outcome? And which you think would be more on equal opportunity? Yeah, if you guessed a command economy on equal outcome and you guessed equal opportunity on the market economy, you would be correct. All right, so again, as you go through, we're going to talk a little bit more about these economic systems, but I want to give you an idea. We talked about this Economic Freedom Index, and the Heritage Foundation did a study a number of years ago, and it rated from number 1 all the way to 180. We talked about the level of economic freedom in a country, with 100 being mostly free and completely free, all the way from 100. You can see the breakdown that from 100 points to 80 points. Let me see, there it is. From 100 to 80, they were free. From 79.9 to 70, they were mostly free. And then it went all the way down. And this is what they did. They rated the countries on property rights and government integrity, judicial effectiveness, all these components. And this is what they rated, and that Hong Kong literally had the most economic freedom of any country in the world. And you remember back what happened a few months ago when China was trying to take back the freedom that they had extended to Hong Kong, and all the riots and everything that was going on. The people of Hong Kong was not ready to give that freedom back. But we look at this and it goes all the way down. When you talked about an example of a true command economy, was North Korea. When you look at that 5.9 out of 100, when we talk about economic freedom within a country. Now, the United States, based on the Heritage Foundation, we ended up at 76.8. And so we ranked, on this study, we ranked number 12, just behind Iceland, Taiwan, and the United Arab Emirates, and Canada, United Kingdom, and Ireland. But there's not that much a difference when you think about between 76 and 80 or 84, when you're looking at these different components. But again, that'll kind of give you an idea of economic freedom and what those are and how a country. So these are all mixed economies because none of them are 100% solely market where there's no government intervention. And even at some level, even North Korea, even though it's really, really, really small, there is a tiny element of a market system type of economic freedom. But essentially all countries in the world are mixed economies. And that's that fourth type of economic system. All right, so I want to get through quickly. Let me talk about productivity and talk about investment in capital goods and human capital. And we've talked about those different types of capital, those things that are man-made that in turn are used to produce other things. So as we go through, some of you guys know what this is. This was an old steamship, and there's an old fire engine. I mean, not a fire engine, but a train, a coal-burning train. Now, believe it or not, this is actually an old computer. I used to have one of these. It was pretty cool way back in the day. And then this was, of course, you guys know this as a telegraph machine, but this was the first cell phone, right? The first time that Jack could carry on a conversation or communicate long distances. But when we think about productivity and innovation, now you think about this massive cargo ship. All those are like those tractor trailer, the trailers that go on the back. Imagine how big those things are. Think about now, you got the bullet train. Now you've got a computer, significant upgrade. Matter of fact, a lot of you guys are probably looking at your phone, which is a computer in itself. And then you've got the ultimate cell phone. But all of this comes from the relationship between production, inputs, factors of production, and outputs, products and services. This is productivity. In 1950, average U.S. corn farmer was able to harvest 39 bushels of corn from an acre of land. Okay, in 2009, 165 bushels. One thing that didn't change was what? The acre of land, right? An acre of land is an acre of land the same size. We just got better at actually producing things. 1950, average amount of milk per cow, 5,314 pounds per year, and one cow would produce 500 pounds of milk. In 2009, almost 21,000 pounds per year. Okay, so think about, again, cows, we were able to figure out how to do it better. In 1950, the average farm output, represented by this slow, very slow John Deere tractor. In 2009, to give you an idea, represented by that. That's actually a cool looking tractor if you're into tractors. But again, how did we do this? How did we get so good in the last 50 years? It was technology, productivity. We figured out how to better utilize an acre of land. Our labor, our workers became much more knowledgeable. We had huge investments in human capital, knowledge, went to school, training. Also, we looked at just physical capital. We figured out how to make things that would produce things better. And that's what we're talking about this and how can we increase our productivity. One, we invest in capital goods. Think about this. Yeah, when you actually, if anybody's ever built something and you have put a nail in a piece of wood, you could use a rock if you wanted to. Not as effective as a hammer, and certainly not as effective, and when I think about that, as some of those nail guns, right? Also investing in human capital. We're talking about the knowledge and skills that we get from taking training, from learning how to do things. So as you guys, right now, what you're doing into school, you are building your human capital, okay? And to always invest in human capital, that's what companies do. Any of you guys who work outside of school, you took some type of training, somebody showed you how to do something. That's investing in human capital, teaching you something that you in turn are going to use to provide a good or service. So as you think about this, as you go through, you are going these employability skills, learning how to office etiquette, communication, and all those different skills that you are going to use to, one, make yourself more marketable in the marketplace. All right, so the last thing we want to talk about, and really briefly, we're going to get into this. You guys already looked at this when you looked at your definitions, was absolute and comparative advantage. Okay, so absolute advantage is the ability of a nation to produce more total units of a good or service. Comparative advantage is the ability of a nation to produce a good or service at a lower opportunity cost. And we're going to look at this again. We're going to do some calculations, but I don't want you to get in too much. It's more of, when you think about this, it's looking at what do we give up to produce something else. And when you guys look at your production possibility frontier and you look at that and you look at, you can't, because of scarcity, we can't produce everything and all numbers of everything. We have to give up something to produce something else. So very quickly, we're looking at, based on absolute advantage, which of these countries, United States or China, has an absolute advantage in bicycle production? That's the one who can actually produce more. Okay? Absolute advantage, the ability of a nation to produce more total units of a good or service. Yeah, China can produce more bicycles. What about bulldozers? The United States can produce more bulldozers. You can see this is production in one day and all of their resources are equal. Okay, so absolute advantage. Bicycles, China has it. In bulldozers, the United States have it. But talk about comparative advantage, though. And this is the ability of a nation to produce a good or service at a lower opportunity cost. In other words, which country is going to give up less to produce a product? And whichever country gives up less to produce a product, that's the product that the country is supposed to produce. And we're going to get into that. So let's go back to our production totals. United States in one day can produce 100 bicycles or 400 bulldozers. They can't produce both. China can produce 150 bicycles or 300 bulldozers. They can't do both. And so let's look at this. Which country then has a comparative advantage in bulldozer production? So this is how we figure this out, because we got to figure out, what do we give up? Okay, if we produce a bulldozer, how many bicycles are we going to give up? If we produce a bicycle, how many bulldozers are we going to give up? And the country that gives up less of the products when they produce another product, that's what they should work with. So this is a way to think through this, okay? And this is a hint. For opportunity cost, you put the other over. So in other words, if we want, let's say that we want to figure out in bulldozer production. But first, let's look at bicycles. So in the United States, if we want to produce one bicycle, and if we put the other over, right? So we take 400 and we would put it over 100. For every one bicycle we produce, that we're going to actually give up 4 bulldozers. You see this? So the other over. So if we're looking for the comparative advantage in bicycles, the other goes over. So we take the 400, we put it over 100. One bicycle would equal 4 bulldozers. If we took here, we're looking at bicycles again. Take 300, put it over 150. So our comparative advantage in bicycles, for every one bicycle, China would have to give up 2 bulldozers. So hopefully you can see how it does in bicycles. So let's see in bulldozer production. Okay. So like we're going to put the other over. So we're looking for bulldozers. So we would say, okay, let's put the 100 over the 400. So for every one bulldozer that the United States produces, we would give up 1/4 of a bicycle. maybe the front tire or the back tire. Okay. China, on the other hand, so what you got is, and for every one bulldozer that China would produce, they would give up a 1/2 of a bicycle. Remember, the other goes over. So which country has a comparative advantage? In other words, at a lower opportunity cost? It would be the USA. So let's look at this, because 1/4 is less than 1/2. So they give up less. Let's look, and if you look on the other side here, I know this may be confusing, but hopefully you are starting to understand what they're willing to give up. The United States could make bicycles, but they're going to give up 4 bulldozers for every one bicycle. There's a pretty good chance that they're going to make more money selling bulldozers than bicycles. China, on the other hand, for every one bicycle, they give up 2 bulldozers, but they give up a whole lot more. When you're talking about for every one bulldozer, they give up a 1/2 a bicycle. So here's what they're going to do, and we talk about the law of comparative advantage, is that nations are better off when they produce their goods or services for which they have a comparative advantage. So here, China has a comparative advantage in bicycles. They give up less bulldozers to produce bicycles. The United States has a comparative advantage in bulldozers. They give up less, right? They give up less bicycles here to produce a bulldozer. hopefully you're seeing this. I don't want to get into too many details. We'll get into that more in international, but you guys learn these definitions.